813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562, or emailing FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Later this hour, the Florida legislative session is 2 weeks away from wrapping up. We check in with the Your Florida team to see what lawmakers are finalizing. And we speak with some student journalists about their First Amendment rights. All this plus your calls and emails after these headlines.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump is addressing reporters this hour. He predicts the U.S. and Israel will, quote, easily prevail in war with Iran. He has projected combat operations may last 4 or 5 weeks. Moments ago, Trump also paid tribute to 4 U.S. service members who died in Kuwait as a result of the war. NPR's Greg Myrie reports on the reasons Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and others have given for military action.
He said this was based on U.S. intelligence and an Israeli strike. And what he was referring to was that the Americans found out these senior Iranian leaders were meeting on Saturday morning, which is the first day of the work week there. And so that's why the Israelis struck on a Saturday morning. You'd expect a nighttime attack, but it was a daytime attack. And they knocked out all of these leaders, including Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader. Israel says they killed about 40 top Iranian leaders.
NPR's Greg Myrie. The U.S. and Israeli airstrikes are hitting key military targets. And as NPR's Jackie Northam reports, Iran is retaliating with strikes against Israel in some Gulf states.
A new front opened in the war in Lebanon after Iran-backed Hezbollah fired rockets into Israel. It responded with airstrikes in Beirut and southern Lebanon, further widening the 3-day-old war. 3 U.S. service members have been killed, and President Trump says more may die before the conflict is over. The White House says Iran wants to restart negotiations and that Trump will eventually talk with whoever is in charge. But a top Iranian security official said on social media that Iran will not negotiate. Meanwhile, U.S. Central Command says several U.S. warplanes crashed in Kuwait due to friendly fire. The crews managed to eject. And an Iranian drone forced the shutdown of one of Saudi Arabia's largest oil facilities. Jackie Northam, NPR News.
The United Kingdom agreed to let the U.S. use its bases to attack Iran. Reporter Duri Buskaran says Cyprus then reported an Iranian drone crashed into a British air base in Cyprus overnight. No one was hurt.
The president of Cyprus, Nikos Christodoulides, said the region is facing an unprecedented crisis, but Cyprus is not involved in any way and does not intend to be part of any military operation. On Sunday, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said the UK had accepted a U.S. request to use British bases for specific limited defensive strikes on Iran. Hours later, a Shahed-type drone crashed into a Royal Air Force base near the village of Akrotiri in Cyprus. The British Ministry of Defense says the base sustained minimal damage, and base authorities advised residents to shelter in place. For NPR News, I'm Duri Buskaran.
The Dow is down nearly 60 points. You're listening to NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
You're listening to WUSF 89.7. I'm Craig Kopp. Your window of time to catch gag grouper in the Gulf has been shrinking for years. It's a way to help the species bounce back from being overfished. WUSF's Jessica Mazzaros reports on a new tool which is helping wildlife officials set links for fishing seasons.
The brownish-gray reef fish has dark worm-like markings on its sides, and its mild taste makes it a popular catch. State researcher Challen Hyman says there's no way to manage the number of people fishing in the Gulf.
But we can set recreational season limits.
Anglers used to have 6 months to hook them back in the day, but last year it was only 14 days. It kind of backfired, though. Turns out the shortened seasons put pressure on anglers to get on the water more often.
People are concentrating their behavior. They're changing their behavior in light of these different regulations.
they were still catching more than the quota allowed for gag grouper. So Hyman helped create a statistical model which includes angler behavior as a factor in predicting the probability of exceeding fishing quotas. And looks like it worked for the 2025 season.
So far, preliminary data has indicated that we are, for the first year in several years, under the quota.
The researchers hope to eventually use the tool for other overfished species like red snapper. Jessica Mazzaros, WUSF 89.7 News.
A Senate committee will take up a bill later today that would transfer USF Sarasota Manatee to New College of Florida. The Senate Appropriations Committee will consider a bill the House moved through its chamber in just 4 days last month. While the House's budget also includes shifting $23 million from USF to New College, that money is not in the Senate's proposal. The House plan also says students enrolled at USF Sarasota Manatee before July 1st of this year would remain associated with USF, provided they graduate within 4 years. I'm Craig Kopp, WUSF 89.7 News.
No political jargon, no talking heads, just smart, clear reporting on what Florida's government is doing and how it hits home. That's Your Florida. We cover the issues so you can decide what matters most.
The Palladium SPC presents Beacon Dance, the acclaimed platform for dance and multidisciplinary collaborations, for its 11th season. Co-produced by St. Pete natives Helen French and Lauren Stone, this Friday, March 6th. More at mypalladium.org.
This is Florida Matters live and local, sponsored by the Darby Law, and we're broadcasting from the Doctors Lorraine Rubis and Neil Frankel studio at WUSF in Tampa. I'm Matthew Petty. The United States and Israeli bombing campaign, which began over the weekend, continues. Florida lawmakers were united in their support for U.S. troops and condemnation of Iranian leadership after the initial strikes, but they differ on support for President Trump and on the path forward. Here's a little sample of what we heard on social media over the weekend. Republican Senator Ashley Moody saying on X, quote, "When someone says they want to destroy you, you should listen, and we have a POTUS that did just that. Today, all Americans should be praying for the success and safety of our servicemen and women." And here's Democratic State Representative Kathy Castor from Tampa on social media as well. Quote, "The American people have repeatedly rejected the idea of another, quote, forever war. History shows that the consequences of entering conflicts without defined objectives or a realistic plan to conclude them cost our nation dearly." Also in Tampa over the weekend, about 50 people gathered to protest the war. Pinellas resident Rowan Finley condemned the killing of civilians. Iranian and state media said an Israeli airstrike hit a school.
No one in the world deserves to live in a world of war.
And here's Hannah Thomas, a Tampa resident studying to become a social worker for veterans.
It's just not right to send these kids into a war that's pointless.
Well, there were also demonstrations that were celebrating the downfall of the Ayatollah in Tampa and Orlando and other places over the weekend as well. We want to hear from you too. Do you think President Trump was justified in ordering those airstrikes on Iran? Are you wondering what happens next? Call 813-755-6562 and let us know what you're thinking. That's 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Well, with us this hour is Arman Mahmoudian. He's a PhD with the University of South Florida's Global and National Security Institute. Arman, thanks for being back with us.
Thank you for inviting me, Matthew.
So we spoke to you a week ago on the show about the build-up of U.S. military might in the Middle East. Is this unfolding how you thought it would?
Well, I expected the war would take place, but I was surprised that it happened before the so-called Friday meeting, because they were supposed to meet again to go through the mutual proposals. It didn't happen, so it happened earlier than that. And for now, from what we've been seeing in the reports here and there and the quotes from some officials, it seems that one of the reasons they rushed into it was on February 28th, the U.S. intelligence service finds a momentum. Apparently, according to the Ayatollah Khomeini's weekly routine, the Office of Supreme Leader held a very important meeting between the Supreme Leader, the previous Supreme Leader, actually, Ayatollah Khomeini, and a member of the Iranian military high command. At the very same time, there was another meeting going on in Tehran too, among other intelligence and military officials. Altogether, there were about 40 senior officials of the Iranian leadership in these two meetings. So from the American point of view, that was a momentum to strike in order to paralyze Iran's political leadership and also command and control system.
Right.
And I think that's why they rushed in it.
I mean, I'm thinking of that kind of old adage from a previous US president, speak softly but carry a big stick. It sounds like those two things are happening, but it's happening all at once here.
It seems like that, yes. It seems that the United States has been trying to apply the good old school method of carrot and a stick both together. And still Americans actually are then doing the same thing. If you listen to the rhetoric of the President Trump and other officials of the White House, they don't deny or reject or close the doors to the negotiation. President Trump has stated at least more than 3 times since the beginning of the war that he's interested to be in a practical, Iran to be a practical partner or friend of the United States, or at least a non-hostile. However, there are preconditions for the Iranians that they need to accept it. But so far, it doesn't seem that the Iranians are there yet. I mean, Ali Larijani, the General Secretary of Iran's Supreme Council for the National Security, who seems to be the man who runs the show after the death of the Ayatollah Khamenei, just yesterday made a tweet denying the Wall Street Journal that Iran wants to negotiate, and stated that we will not negotiate. We actually, unlike the Americans, being prepared for a long-term war. So if you take his word for it, it doesn't seem that the Tehran at least is yet there to make a political settlement to this military conflict.
We're talking with Arman Mahmoudian with USF's Global and National Security Institute. What are you thinking as you see images of the bombing campaign in Iran? What questions or concerns do you have? Give us a call, 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. We talked about this last week as well, but President Trump has talked about regime change. He's talked about Iran's nuclear program. Of course, that's at the heart of those negotiations you were discussing. We've heard something quite different from Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth. What do you think the objective is here?
Well, to be honest, we are hearing, as you mentioned, different objectives. Initially, it was the regime change, and before that, President Trump said that would be a good thing to happen. Peter Hegseth, the war secretary, has mentioned that democracy is not the agenda. Actually, Lindsey Graham, who was one of the advocates of the application of military pressure against Iran, also on Sunday, I believe, in an interview, he mentioned that the regime change is not the goal. I think what the United States at this point is aiming for is not necessarily enforcing a regime change in Iran by itself. I think the goal is that, and if you look at the way that the U.S. is targeting Iran, yesterday they targeted basically the police offices and a station across the country, and also internal intelligence services and Basij bases. Basij is, for the audience that they don't know, is a paramilitary in Iran, tied with the IRGC, but it's mostly formed by voluntarily or part-time forces. Their job basically is suppression. They are coercive apparatus.
So are they loyal to the supreme leader in the Iranian government, or are they? I mean,
extremely loyal.
We are hearing
they're extremely loyal.
They
have joined that entity out of the ideological and some financial incentive, but largely loyalty. But if you look at these places that have been targeted by the U.S., we can get an assessment that maybe the United States is not necessarily interested in changing the regime by itself, but would like to paralyze the entire security forces in Iran, which would provide the Iranian people who just went on the street in the January and been suppressed through bloodshed with the window of the opportunity, basically a security vacuum, to take advantage of it, go on the streets, seize the institutions, and assume power for themselves, and then they topple the regime rather than the American forces.
Yeah. Let's get a call in here. We've got Sammy on the line. Sammy, you're on the air. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking that we have a president that avoided military service, so he's really unclear as to what America represents when it's operating rogue behavior versus what this country has fought for, and the millions of military service members that had a true understanding of what the goals were and how we were going to start into this kind of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a country that represents peace and civilization. And when he has no respect for servicemen and has declared that over and over, he also doesn't have any respect for the cost of lives for any country, including America.
Sammy,
it's really,
I get the sense that you're opposed to sort of what we're seeing unfold in Iran over the weekend. Thank you so much for your thoughts there. I mean, what about that, Arman? Because on the one hand, we are hearing from President Trump. He's saying, I believe he said something to the effect of, I think it's up to 4 U.S. personnel have died so far. He said there will be more. So we're hearing that. And on the objective, the objectives of this campaign, like, do you get the sense that there's kind of a unified front from U.S. forces and in terms of what they're trying to achieve here?
Well, first of all, thank you, Sammy. I appreciate your concern. I'm sure many Americans share the concerns. Look, so far there have been 4 casualties. The 4th one been announced today. And we know yesterday relatively was a tough day. Relatively, 3 F-15 also been shot down in Kuwait over a friendly fire. Apparently, the Kuwaitis air defense who've been overwhelmed by targeting Iranian drones and missiles. They confuse or they mistaken the American F-15s in the radar belt with the Iranian projectiles, so they shot down them.
Yeah.
But luckily, all the 6 pilots are alive, and mild injuries for few, but they're good. But I want to emphasize that this war's nature is different from Iraq and Afghanistan war so far.
Right.
Iraq and Afghanistan war been largely a ground operation. There were boots on the ground. About 500,000 of the American troops been deployed to the Iraq in the first strike, and then at some point there were thousands and thousands of the U.S. troops across the region. And naturally, when you have a presence on the ground, you do have a much higher casualty. The current war with Iran, if it stays limited to aerial campaign, wouldn't get there, wouldn't get to the point of that level of casualty in terms of human loss.
Yeah.
Economically speaking, that's a different story. Iranians are actively targeting the energy market and the flow of the oil from the region. They de facto shut down the Strait of Hormuz. It seems that
Arman, are you able to stay with us for a couple more minutes if you could? We just got to go to a break, but I just wanted to ask you a couple more questions. I believe we've got another caller or 2 on the line too. So we are talking with Arman Mahmoudian with USF, talking about the situation in Iran. I want to hear from you as well if you've got thoughts about what is unfolding in Iran, the US and Israeli bombing campaign there. 813-755-6562 is the number. You can email us, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. More to come in just a moment.
At WUSF, support comes from the people who listen, like you. Also, Seitenbacher, with a new web shop. Healthy muesli, cold-pressed oils, and vegetable broth mix delivered to your door from right here in Tampa Bay. Details at Seitenbacher.com. Seitenbacher. Seitenbacher. Celebrate an inspiring evening of the arts and mental health as the National Alliance on Mental Illness Sarasota Manatee presents Arts and
WUSF, strong, local, and independent in a year when state and federal funding have disappeared. Begin the year by supporting the source you rely on. Join us at WUSF.org.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local, and the discussion continues with Arman Mahmoudian. He's a PhD. He's with the U.S. University of South Florida's Global and National Security Institute, talking about the bombing campaign that has begun in Iran. The United States and Israeli planes are bombing Tehran and other targets across Iran. We're seeing some retaliation from Iran too, firing missiles into Gulf states, allies of the United States. Want to hear from you as well. 813-755-6560. Do you have concern about what's happening? Is this something that you are celebrating? We are seeing some celebration from folks who are pleased about the toppling or the killing of the supreme leader of Iran. But what comes next? 813-755-6562. Let's go to the phones. We've got Kathy on the line. Kathy, you're on the air. What are you thinking?
Yes, I need to say I am thrilled that President Trump got rid of the biggest killer of women in the world. This man would behead people if they stole something, or, if they drank alcohol, if they had trouble with their husband, they got stoned. Be grateful that that man is dead, and hopefully the rest of the regime will topple as well. And the people can make up their minds, and we can go in and help them later if they need it, and they can be partners like they once were, okay, and better. And let Trump do his stuff. Quit with the TDS, everybody. It's nauseating. It's old. What do you think Kamala could have done in this situation? Knock it off, everybody. Get real.
Okay,
period.
Kathy, thank you so much for your call. I appreciate that. Arman, let me put that to you. I mean, this notion of, as we're hearing from the caller there, that a reflection of maybe the crackdown on women's rights for one thing, but we did see that uprising earlier in Iran that was put down pretty brutally by the Iranian regime. So, what's your response to that?
I think many, Katie, thank you for a call. Many, I think, in Iran actually would share the sentiment with you. The Iranian regime been quite an oppressive regime for the last 47 years. I mean, from the very beginning, it oppressed the rights of the people, the total population of the Iran, politically, socially, economically. And we have seen the Iranian people since the 1997 have been actively trying to stand against it, defend their own life through the civic matters. It began with the student protests in 1997. Mm-hmm. They attacked the college campuses. They actually threw students off the roof. And then from there, it continued. There was the Green Movement in 2006 and 2007. And then there was a presidential election. Apparently, they cheated in that election, or at least a good chunk of Iranians believe that they went to the streets, they killed people. And then later on, news came up that many of people who also been on the streets, captured by the security forces, they've been sexually harassed in the prisons.
Yeah.
And then we have continuously up until now in the January that we have a protest in Iran in a span of 5 days in the famous Bloody Friday, specifically speaking, toward the late of the January. The government killed thousands of the people. The Islamic Republic, who has a tendency to always reduces or increases or understates the number of the casualty in civilian protests.
Sure.
To a significant extent. Mentioned that 3,200 people been killed. Human rights organization says 8,000. President Trump says that 32,000 people. So altogether, the Iranian coercive apparatus has a blood of many, Iranian and non-Iranian, across the region and internationals, American soldiers in Beirut and other places in Iraq, the Syrian people, the Lebanese, Iraqis, Israelis, across the world, on their hand. And I do think that many would share the K2 sentiment. So that would be my answer.
Yeah. Okay, let me get another call in here if I could, real quick. Susan, you're on the air. What are you thinking?
Hi. I'm a military daughter and a Republican. And my biggest fear is that this dangerous fool who is now in the Oval Office is going unchecked around the world. I want to say to my Republican congressmen, Republican leadership, where are you? How can we stand for someone who's never served in the military, who shuns the UN Charter, who is whittling away at the checks and balances, who did not go to Congress for authorization, nor to the American people? How can we allow this dangerous fool to continue to go unchecked?
Thank you for your call. So I want to ask you that, Arman, but before I could, real quick, I mean, we did hear another comment that caught my ear from Pete Hegseth. He said something along the lines of the United States would not follow, quote, stupid rules of engagement for this war. I mean, I wonder what you make of that and the call that we just heard now.
Well, I need to hear. I need to know the context of it. What was the question that he answered? That could be a very broad thing. That could be
Sure.
from the Geneva Convention to military tactical and all responses. For instance, it could be a response to it could be the proportionate response, meaning that if you attack me once, I will attack you once.
Mm-hmm.
But now, if you attack me once, I will attack you 10 times. That could be also a translation of it. It very much depends on the context, but it also can be basically foregoing of the international law and the conventions. Like I think in the civilian infrastructure, put total blockage on the food and energy distribution inside the country, or even other places like the hospitals and other places. So I don't know what this is the context of the Secretary of the War, but I also want to point out that the U.S. officials, the military officials, the commanders, the generals. They have made it clear in past that they are not going to follow through with the command that it is a war crime. If you remember back in 2020, when the United States killed the Iranian General Soleimani and Iran was about to retaliate, President Trump made a tweet threatening Iranian that in an event of attack on US would target about 53 historical and cultural sites in Iran that they really value. And there was a reaction from the military officials that they would not follow through with the command, and it is of their obligation. A command that is violation of it can be considered as a war crime, and U.S. back down. So that is also a vanguard that we have in place. And I think to Susan's remark about the I think that's a good comment, and I believe in general, not only in context of the President Trump, in a broader way.
Can I just need to cut in real quick. I just wanted to put one more call on the air if I could. We've got Mark on the line. Mark, if you could make your point in about 30 seconds or less, that'd be great.
The important thing is the end game, where this is going.
Yeah.
What we need to do is see the Shah's son end up leading again and have a democratic-type government. And that's what he intends.
Okay, Mark,
we're
going to have to wrap this, but I don't think we have time to get into the Shah question here, Arman, but end game, that's very important. So in the last sort of 10 seconds or so, where does this end? Where do you see this going?
Briefly, the end game for the United States would be destroying the Iranian command and control system, the high command, its retaliatory and offensive capability, and paralyzing largely Iran's internal law enforcement and security forces, hoping that would provide the protester and opposition with the chance to topple the regime.
Yeah.
But who comes after that? This is a $1 million question. So many candidates, but neither of them right now have the upper hand in the field inside the country.
Arman Mahmoudian, thank you so much for your insights. Really appreciate that. Arman is with USF's Global and National Security Institute, and I'm sure we'll have you back on to discuss more as this situation unfolds.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, coming up next, we're going to hear a little bit about First Amendment rights in Sarasota. Some high school kids getting a first-hand look at the First Amendment and how that applies to their student newspaper. Stay with us. Florida Matters Live and Local continues in a moment.
I'm Emma Brisk, a WUSF Zimmerman Radio News intern. Working alongside this incredible team of passionate journalists has been an inspiring experience. No intern expects to interview the Tampa mayor on their very first day in the field, but I did, and that's exactly what makes this opportunity so unique. I'm deeply grateful for my time in the WUSF newsroom, which solidified my love for broadcasting.
Listener support powers WUSF. Funding also comes from Badawi Law, offering legal services in personal injury, immigration, and auto accidents, with offices in Tampa, Florida. Office information and practice details at badawilaw.com or learn more on Instagram at Badawi Law. Hunger may be right next door. Nearly 220,000 people in your community struggle to afford food. You can join All Faiths Food Bank to end hunger in Sarasota and DeSoto counties. Learn more at allfaithsfoodbank.org.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. You know that sound. Class is in session, and today we're getting a lesson in the First Amendment and following school policy from Sarasota County students. Sarasota County schools reaffirmed their commitment to working with all law enforcement, including immigration and customs enforcement, back in January. And this came despite hours of public comment speaking out against the idea. High schoolers at the Pineview School chronicled the situation with 2 articles for their newspaper. Number 1, an opinion piece about the district's choice to schedule the meeting during class times so students couldn't participate, and 2, a straightforward news article about the district's decision. But publication of their articles was held up in review for nearly a month and delayed by the principal, who used artificial intelligence to produce a 16-page document showing the ways he said their work was biased. Then the non-profit civil liberties group Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE, stepped in. Now the students' work is published online. It seems a resolution has been reached as well. All sides are joining us now to talk more about it. You can weigh in as well. You can call 813-755-6562. Share your thoughts about student journalism, school districts and ICE by calling 813-755-6562 or emailing FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. We're here to walk us through the situation and the solution that was reached. The young journalist, a high school junior and a high school senior from Pineview School in Sarasota, Ellie Chung, Assistant Editor-in-Chief of The Torch, and Alex Lieberman, Opinion Editor of The Torch. Ellie and Alex, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we're really excited.
We're also joined by Sarasota County Schools Supervisor of Government Affairs, Chris Parenteau. Chris, thank you as well.
Thank you for having me.
And Marie McMullen, Student Press Counsel from the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. Marie, thank you as well.
Thanks for having me.
And you can also join the conversation, as I said before, the number 813-755-6562. Maybe you've got thoughts about student newspapers, how these articles are reviewed and published. Maybe some thoughts on ICE and schools. 813-755-6562 is the number. You can also reach out by email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Alex and Ellie, I want to start with you. Alex, you wrote the news story, I should say, about the school board's decision. It was titled "Students Stand Resolute on School Board Decision. Pineview Students Take to the Podium and Speak Out on a School Board Decision." And your editor-in-chief, Ava Lorenz, who isn't available to join us today, but she wrote an opinion piece called "School Board Not Serving Students." Now, did you have a discussion beforehand about how your writing would be received, I wonder?
We knew that for my story, we might have a few edits from our administration, but we weren't expecting like the holdup that we did encounter, and I don't think we expected that at all for Ava's story.
Yeah. Ellie, what was your kind of expectation going into the publication or the anticipated publication of these pieces?
Yeah, so as a staff, we have discussions about which stories we'd like to choose, and these discussions go on for multiple days, multiple class periods. So we really do put a lot of thought into what gets published, and we all have conversations with our editors about who to interview, making sure we have sides of both stories. So going into it, I really thought it would be, a pretty smooth process, considering that we received opinions from multiple school board members, and we also interviewed students. So I didn't expect, like Alex said, as much of the pushback as we received.
And are these pieces that you produce, is it submitted to, senior school leadership for review typically? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so there's around 6 different rounds of edits. So initially, after the staff writer creates the piece, it then goes to the section editor, and after the section editor reviews it, it goes back to the student who wrote the piece, and then after the student makes the edits, the section editor looks at it again, and that entire process is repeated except with the copy editor, which is either me, Ava Lenners, or our other assistant editor-in-chief, Robin Schoenberg. Mm-hmm. And then after that, it goes to our journalism advisor, Mr. Lenners. And then after that, it goes to administration.
Okay, wow. So that's a pretty lengthy process.
Yes.
Have you had pieces rejected before? And if you have, what were they about?
Yes. From my memory, there was a piece when I was a freshman for the section sports about pre-workout drinks, and the pushback was, administration doesn't want to support caffeine usage among students. There are other instances where, more controversial pieces have been censored, but I feel like up until this point, there hasn't been, we've always been able to come to a resolution, and there hasn't been this lengthy of a process.
Yeah. Okay, we're talking with Alex Lieberman, who's the opinion editor of The Torch, and Ali Chung, assistant editor-in-chief of The Torch from Pineview School in Sarasota, talking about some pieces that were submitted for publication, were held up in review for a while, and then finally published online. Let me just read a statement from the school district. This came out last week. After discussing the situation and reviewing information from all parties involved, we believe a satisfactory resolution has been reached. During the review process, considerations were provided for discussion. However, these considerations were not a denial of publication, nor were they mandated as a condition of publication. Since the time these considerations were given, no denial of publication has been issued. The school and district value the role of student journalism and remain committed to reviewing each article submitted for publication in accordance with District Policy 4.51 and applicable case law. Moving forward, the district will review protocols and approval timelines to help ensure timely resolutions and consistent application of approval processes. All right, so some kind of legalese in there, but Chris, if I could bring you into this conversation. Chris Parenteau, Supervisor of Government Affairs for Sarasota County Schools. I'm just wondering, you've obviously, I'm assuming, taken a look at these pieces. What was different about them compared to what's been written in the past, to your knowledge?
Well, I can't speak specifically about the decision of the school principal. With all of our school publications, those are, the final approval is at the school level with the school principal, because these are school-sponsored publications. But we do have a process in place now where if a decision is made at the school level and there is disagreement and those aren't able to be resolved at the school level, that it can escalate up to district administrators to ensure that we do find resolutions in all of these areas, regardless of what the piece is about, and does it meet the requirements of what is needed within our policy and with applicable laws that govern these types of student publications. And really one of the things that we're doing now as a district is taking the opportunity to look at all of our schools and what those review timelines look like.
Yeah.
How can we build in additional time for any article that's submitted so that we can ensure that as school administrators are reviewing that, if there are concerns, if there are considerations that are given to the student journalists, that there is time built in there to get those issues resolved before any publication deadline would hit. And so that's one of the things that we really want to do working with our school administrators, is make sure that we do have those timelines in place that allow for that.
Marie, with the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, Marie McMullen, if I could bring you into this conversation, how did FIRE get involved? Like, what was the process there?
Yes, FIRE learned about this through local reporting in the Florida community that came to our attention. And from there, we looked into it, and I had seen other Torch articles from the Pineview student journalist that talked about some of the similar issues that the principal had cited as reasons to pause publication. And that set off the red flag that because these articles were specifically critical of the school board, they may have been paused because of the viewpoints they expressed. And that would be a problem, not just from a constitutional standard, but also the school board's own policy.
Yeah, okay, let me put that back to you, Chris. I mean, is that your read on it? Was it because of the content, because there was perceived to be some criticism of the school board in there that these were paused, sort of singling them out where others may not have been?
No, I don't think it was that they were critical of the board or any board decisions. We've had articles that have been published in many of our school publications that have been critical of the district, the school board, and decision-making processes that have happened along the way. I think it was more making sure that as we got through all of those articles, making sure that it lined up with our policy, which was just revised last year, and adding some additional information in there about the boxes that need to be checked. So I think that was the reason for the extended timeline over what maybe had historically been the timeline for these reviews.
If you're just joining us on Florida Matters Live and Local, we're talking about a couple of pieces from student journalists from Sarasota's Pineview School and the school district's decision, or the leadership, I should say, about student articles chronicling the district reaffirming its commitment to working with law enforcement and ICE The student journalist work was held up in review. FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, stepped in. That work has now been published online. You can share your thoughts about student journalism, school districts cooperating with ICE, or the First Amendment in the classroom. Give us a call, 813-755-6562, or email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Ellie and Alex, let me come back to you for a moment. So, to your how do you feel this has been resolved? I mean, does this feel like a satisfactory resolution? Are you happy that the work is now finally published? Do you still have questions about, how you work going forward?
Yeah, so I'd like to comment about the timeline discussion. So our pieces, as a staff leadership, we have assigned timelines and dates that we get our pieces and our pages into administration. And that assigned date was January 23rd. And the opinion piece was submitted 2 days before that, January 21st. And the news piece was submitted on time, January 23rd as well. So with regards to issues about the timeline, as a staff, we really pride ourselves on making sure we get our stories in on time. So that comment, I feel like, is a little bit irrelevant. With regards to the content of the pieces, our opinion page, we always state that the opinions of the students do not represent the pedagogical interests of the school. The comments made on the opinion pages are strictly relevant to the students who write them. So with regards to the comments made about opinion, we really do make sure that we are isolating ourselves from the school's opinion. And we actually did have the opportunity to work with Mr. Parento to pass the policy, and he was really supportive with that process. We were really grateful that we were able to create an appeals process. If there's a disagreement that arises with administration, with the principal, we were able to submit that to a county staff, and that was pretty helpful in the process. But going forward, I just want to make sure that we are clear about exactly what the policy states, and that we are able to make these appeals in the future as well.
And Marie, I should say, with FIRE, I mean, does this seem like the way a dispute over something like this should be resolved? Like, are you happy with the way things have turned out here?
I'm glad that the reporters were able to see their stories hit the web pages. However, the practical effect was that they couldn't go into print. And as a former student journalist myself, there's something so rewarding about seeing your story in print. So there was still a loss there. But the fact that these stories were able to be told is satisfactory from my standpoint.
Alex, I wonder what you think as a reporter, somebody's kind of at the ground level of writing these pieces. I mean, has it changed the way you think about the work you're doing for the Torch, for student journalism?
I wouldn't say that it's changed the way I think about it. I think I've always thought of it as, real journalism and journalism that need to subscribe to ethical standards. And I think that will continue. I'm very glad that we did get to publish articles, at least online. But I think the biggest loss from this is probably our advisor resigning because of the situation. And I don't blame him for that. I would really like to see a discussion with our administration about possibly changing our approval process at the school level, because in my personal opinion, I think that might motivate him to come back.
Do you have an advisor now? Has somebody stepped in to help you out?
His resignation is effective next year.
Oh, wow. Okay. So he's with you for a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Are you lobbying some of the other teachers? Because this is a pretty important job, right?
No, we haven't really been reaching out to anyone. I don't think that it's really settled for a lot of us. I feel like it just hasn't occurred to all of us.
Yeah.
That we're going to have to find someone new, and we don't want that to be the case. We're still kind of holding out hope that maybe administration will email him asking if he would consider coming back.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to leave the discussion there, but thank you so much for sort of teaching us that valuable lesson about the First Amendment. Ellie Chung and Alex Lieberman, young journalists with the Pineview Torch. Really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Also joined this hour by Chris Parento, Supervisor of Government Affairs from Sarasota County Schools. Chris, thank you as well.
Thank you for having me.
And Marie McMullen from the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. Marie, thank you too.
Thank you so much.
And you can read the student articles at pvtorch.com. Coming up next, we're going to get an update on state politics, checking in with Tallahassee as lawmakers eye the finish line in this year's legislative session. That's coming up next on Florida Matters Live and Local. Stay with us.
I'm Indira Lakshmanan. The war in Iran and the Middle East is heating up as attacks widen to many other countries in the region. We'll have the latest, and we'll consider the national security challenges that face the U.S. and ask what role Congress should be playing in this war. That's next time on Here and Now.
Join us this afternoon from 1 to 3 on WUSF 89.7.
The little orchestra that crosses classical, jazz, and old-fashioned pop genres, Pink Martini, performs at the Duke Energy Center Mahaffey Theater, Friday, March 6th. A dozen musicians with music from all around the world. More at themahaffey.com. Support for the Zest podcast comes from WUSF members and Adelaide Interiors, a full-service design partner. Their new showroom on Kennedy Boulevard in Tampa showcases the latest styles in kitchen, bath, furniture, and interior design. And they offer hands-on cooking sessions. Details at Adelaide.com.
Hey, I'm Gabriella Paul, and I report on people living paycheck to paycheck in the region.
They're firefighters, they're teachers, they're nurses, but they don't make enough money to pay the bills. And they're one paycheck away from being on the street or in some sort of substandard housing.
At WUSF, I tell your stories about the rising cost of living.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. Well, lawmakers up in Tallahassee are counting down to the end of the legislative session. It's a kind of a 2-month sprint, but the end is in sight. Just 2 weeks left remain for them to wrap up their work in Tallahassee and pass a budget. That is the one big job they have to do. But the House and the Senate are millions of dollars apart on budget proposals. So to help us explain what's ahead for the budget negotiations, what happens if lawmakers in both chambers can't agree, here's WSF's Douglas Soul with the Your Florida team. Douglas, great to have you with us.
Yeah, it's great to be on.
Okay, so we have a couple of budget proposals from the House and Senate. We actually talked about this a couple of weeks ago. So they'd both pitched these up, but there's some big differences in the two plans, right? So just refresh our memory a little bit. What are these plans? What's the difference here?
You know, there's roughly $1.5 billion in between the House and Senate plans. And critically, the chamber can't agree on a tax package right now either. At the beginning of this segment, you mentioned 2 weeks left. Well, Matthew, sorry to say that I don't know if that's going to be the case. The House right now is moving to adopt rules that allow lawmakers to fundraise during an extended session, which certainly signifies some belief that we are going to see in an extended session just like last year.
Yeah, okay, right. And the fundraising is an important point, right? Because we're in an election year this year, so they've got other things on their mind.
Yes, I mean, this is a big election year, and where the primary season has already really begun. If you even glance at social media, you'll know that's the case. So, last year that was not an election year and we saw session run late, but, it's top of mind. So it's really interesting because these lawmakers are going to be, at the stressful time of year where they're trying to keep their seats, but they're not even going to have potentially a budget done as they do so, depending on when they can figure out the details and bridge the differences they're currently apart on.
Yeah. Now, you watch pretty closely how these plans are hashed out, Douglas. What's actually involved in the budget discussions and how do these two chambers work things out?
So much of what happens is behind closed doors. Even today and throughout various meetings this week, there will be meetings where the chambers have like joint budget committees where they try to reconcile their differences. But all of those differences being reconciled through agreements behind closed doors. There's a lot of leveraging that goes on here. It's incredibly interesting I guess I'm not seeing it because it's behind closed doors, but to observe in my journalist seat, there's priorities of the Senate president and the House Speaker that haven't passed their opposing chambers because of potentially leverage reasons. There's all sorts of debates about different spending priorities from, aid spending, aid drug spending to school spending. I mean, there's so many areas here that are not resolved, and they have to be resolved very soon. I mean, we're coming up to the end, as you mentioned yourself.
Yeah, actually less than 2 weeks now, March 13th. Friday the 13th is when they are supposed to end this legislative session. It sounds, Douglas, like you are not overly optimistic. Are we looking like running into overtime, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I can't say it's a certitude that we're going into overtime, but if I was a betting man, I would maybe bet that that might be the case. Now, the big question here is how long are they going to need to get this done if they do go uh, over the deadline here? And I don't know. It could be days, could be weeks. I mean, it could be months. I mean, we just don't know how far apart they are. I mean, right now it's not looking too optimistic when you study the remarks of the chamber's leadership.
Mhm.
But you know, we're certainly. I'm looking at my vacation plans and getting kind of worried here, Matthew.
So last year, correct me if I'm wrong, it was like 45 days more or 45 days beyond when they were supposed to end the
Yes.
session.
Yeah, that is correct. And an important note about last year, though, was one, it was an election year, but two, the session started later last year. So, you know, it's alternating years, starts in January or it starts in March.
Mhm.
Last year, it started in March, which created the summer deadline. I mean, there's a certain deadline where the budget has to be done or we risk a government shutdown. That's farther down the road this time around. So, do they take longer because of that less imposing deadline? I don't know. But last year, there were, just like this year, differences in the budget size and differences in the tax policy and other priorities came into play. I mean, one thing that has to be noted as well is the House and the governor are really at odds right now on
Mhm.
various things. And, you know, that's creating drama even with the Senate, who the House believes is maybe too familiar and friendly with the governor right now. So there are so many different currents in the Capitol right now. We don't, I mean, who knows where the currents are going to drag us?
Yeah, okay. Well, you're right there in the thick of it, swimming along with them. Douglas Soul with WSF's Your Florida team is with us with an update from Tallahassee. I mean, I imagine there is, like, even if they can fundraise while they're up there doing that work in Tallahassee, there is a bit of an imperative for them to get back and mix it up with their constituents, folks who are running for re-election. So that's some kind of urgency, I suppose, to have them work things out sooner rather than later.
You would think so, but yeah, I mean that just goes back into also like I mean I don't think any of them want to extend session certainly. So it's just like are they just going to have to because of the divisions between the chambers? You know, this is a big year for politics, as we all know, and going home to your constituents and saying you don't have a budget done yet, maybe not be the ideal situation for a lawmaker.
Right. Well, let's pivot a little bit, if we could, Douglas, and talk about some of the other bills that you've been following. One idea floating around there is to let your boss help you buy a home. Now, we all know about the challenge facing first-time home buyers, actually buyers of home at any stage of their home buying career. But here is State Representative Michelle Saltzman, a Republican from Escambia County.
I'm really grateful to see the bill here in Commerce. I'm hopeful to see it on the floor and see it be passed. You put a lot of work into this, and you did a really good job.
All right, so just fill us in a bit here. Who is Representative Saltzman talking to, and what would this bill do?
You know, so Salzman is referring to addressing a Democratic lawmaker who sponsored the bill, and this is one of those bills. Well, most bills actually pass the legislature in a bipartisan manner, but very rarely do you see like such a. I mean, this is one of those goodwill bills between the parties where you're not seeing them going at each other's throats, as sometimes is the case in a lot of the headlines we write. This bill is certainly an interesting one. Employers would be able to contribute anywhere from a grand to $5,000 for an employee's down payment, and they get 110% tax credit back on that. And you know, I'm sitting here thinking $1,000 to $5,000 is not a small sum for certainly not me and many other Floridians who are also eyeing the high cost of homes. I'm an apartment renter myself, and one day I like to buy a house. And unfortunately, though, as a WUSF staff member, this doesn't apply to me, though. So the credit is limited to companies that pay Florida corporate income taxes or insurance premium taxes.
Right, so
Now,
non-profits are off the table?
Yeah, so nonprofits are excluded. So are many small businesses as well as government employers. Now, of course, a lot of Floridians are going to be potential beneficiaries of this, but a lot aren't. Though those involved in this bill-making process indicate that down the line they'd want to expand this out to other Floridians as well.
Yeah, right. So that sounds like one piece of law, at least, that has a good sniff of victory there. And we should note that bill sponsored by Representative Javante Tay Edmonds of West Palm Beach. He's a Democrat. Well, there's another bill that is causing a few waves. Lawmakers are mulling an idea to allow the state to designate some groups as domestic terror organizations. The bill's sponsors say this is all about public safety, but opponents disagree. Here's State Senator Tina Polsky, who's a Democrat from South Florida.
This legislation is dangerously overbroad and threatens fundamental civil liberties. It concentrates extraordinary powers in the hands of a few government officials to label individuals and organizations as domestic terrorists.
All right, so tell us a little more about the bill, Douglas, and why are some folks worried about it?
Yeah, well, the sponsors say it's to protect Florida interests as well as Florida people from terrorist activity. But Democrats, as you heard, as well as civil liberty advocates, worry that this would violate constitutional rights. They worry that it could lead an organization to be branded a domestic terrorist organization without due process. And they also worry this could be used to disproportionately target Muslim-led organizations, for example.
Mm-hmm. A couple of other things that you are keeping an eye on. I mean, you've got a busy week coming up this week. Obviously, lawmakers rushing to try and get some sort of deal on the budget, but there's some other things too that you're noting. One, the Florida Supreme Court rejecting a challenge to Governor DeSantis' redistricting plan. What does this mean for voters, briefly?
Yeah, that's an important thing to talk about because this redistricting talk is really, really a big one, not only in Florida, but nationwide. Florida has a scheduled special session at the end of April to potentially change its congressional map. Some state leaders in the Republican Party indicate that Florida could maybe add 3 to 5 Republicans to its House delegation, which would have significant nationwide policy importance when you consider how tight the margins are between the parties in the U.S. House right now.
For sure, yeah.
So a group challenged that in state court, the decision to have a special session. And there's also some election deadlines that were pushed back because of potential changes in the congressional delegation or the districts themselves. And this is Florida Supreme Court rejected that petition. So it looks like it looks like we're full steam ahead on a special session. I mean, there's other things we have to factor in as well.
Right.
State leaders say that they want to change the map so that they can accommodate a Supreme Court decision that impacts how race is considered in the process. We don't even know if that decision is going to be done by the end of April now. And lawmakers are going to be really careful because on our state constitution, we have restrictions of changing the map for partisan reasons. So I don't know what happens if this decision from the Supreme Court's not done.
Yeah.
Which was the justification for the need of a special session. So there's a lot of things to look for here. But of course, some groups are unhappy and some Democrats are unhappy that the Supreme Court knocked this one down.
Well, Douglas, we're going to have to leave it there. WUSF's Douglas Soul, part of the Your Florida team covering state government and its impact on you and your neighbours. Douglas, thank you so much.
No, I look forward to talking to you next week, Matthew.
Indeed. Well, tomorrow on Florida Matters Live and Local, some cities and counties in Tampa Bay are imposing nighttime curfews for teens. The Manatee County Sheriff says it's to protect teenagers. What do you think? Is it a smart move? Does it restrict teenagers' rights? Call 813-755-6562 and leave a message. And tune in Tuesday at noon and join the conversation. That's our show for today. Our executive producer is Grayson Doctor. Our producers are Amelie Horace and Quincy Walters. Our engineers are Jackson Harp and Geo Garvin. Jackson composed our theme music. Warren Buckholtz handled the video today. Thanks so much for listening and watching, and we'll see you this time tomorrow.
War has ignited in the Middle East. We take you inside Iran to learn what people there are seeing and feeling with ongoing bombardment and the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. On the one hand, we're celebrating the death of a dictator. On the other hand, we're fearful of dying at any moment. That's next time on The World.
You can hear The World at 3 o'clock after Here and Now, which is next. You're listening to WUSF 89.7 Tampa, winner of the 2025